It's Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Closer to a deal with China, maybe. Banning food dyes at the FDA and a huge case for parental rights at the Supreme Court. Next on the AM Update.
They wanted me to share with all of you that we're doing very well in respect to a potential trade deal with China.
In our leadership class seems stricken by self-doubt and even fear of the future. President Trump rejects these failed ideas. He wants America to grow.
The last 50 years, American children have increasingly been living in a toxic soup of synthetic chemicals.
Once a leaker, always a leaker, often a leaker.
Leading the greatest state in the greatest nation on earth is not some consolation prize.
Bloomberg reported yesterday that Secretary Scott Bessent told a closed-door investor summit that the tariff standoff with China is unsustainable and that he expects the situation to de-escalate. Bessent added that negotiations haven't started, but that a deal is possible. It's according to people who attended the session at an event hosted by J.P. Morgan. Charles Gasparino at Fox News came out and said he talked to a source close to Bessent and that those comments were actually taken out of context and really exaggerated. There are reports today that it sounds like Bessent will be addressing the nation later this morning, actually, on the state of the financial system in the United States. At the Oval Office, President Trump addressed the state of play when it comes to China and trade.
We'll see what happens, but ultimately they have to make a deal because otherwise they're not going to be able to deal in the United States. So we want them involved. But they have to, and other countries have to make a deal.
Trump also said tariffs are coming down on China as long as they come to the table.
145% is very high, and it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high. It got up to that. We were talking about fentanyl, where, various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high.
What level do you think it'll come down to if you have it?
It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero.
On the topic of Fed Chair Jerome Powell, Trump also added,
the press runs away with things. No, I have no intention of firing him.
Vice President J.D. Vance is in India this week, talking trade and other matters. Here he is addressing a conference in Jaipur.
Contrast with too many in the West, where some in our leadership class seem stricken by self-doubt and even fear of the future. To them, humanity is always one bad decision away from catastrophe. The world will soon end, they tell us, because we're burning too much fuel or making too many things or having too many children. And so, rather than invest in the future, they too often retreat from it. Some of them pass laws that force their nations to use less power. They cancel nuclear and other energy generation facilities, even as their choices, the choices of these leaders, lead to more dependence on foreign adversaries. Meanwhile, their message to their friends, to countries like India, is to tell them that they're not allowed to grow. Well, President Trump rejects these failed ideas. He wants America to grow. He wants India to grow.
And he wants to build the future with our partners all over the world. Vice President J.D. Vance concludes during his talks in India. Apparently, some negotiations with India are going quite well, according to Vance and other reports that surfaced yesterday. Back at home, the Department of Health and Human Services and the Food and Drug Administration announced a series of measures to phase out 8 artificial food dyes and colorings from America's food supply by the end of next year. Speaking at a news conference, FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary, he said the agencies are looking to revoke authorization for 2 synthetic food colorings and eliminate 6 remaining synthetic dyes used in cereal and other food products.
Today, the FDA is taking action to remove petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply and from medications. For the last 50 years, American children have increasingly been living in a toxic soup of synthetic chemicals. The scientific community has conducted a number of studies raising concerns about the correlation between petroleum-based synthetic dyes and several health conditions, such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, obesity, diabetes, insulin resistance, cancer, genomic disruption, GI issues, as I've seen in the hospital, and allergic reactions. For example, this Lancet study conducted a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled study on food dyes and concluded that artificial colors in the diet, quote, result in increased hyperactivity.
HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. also added these remarks.
We are spending as much on mitochondrial disorders like diabetes as we spend on our military budget. We can't continue to exist like this. And the problem is industry is making money keeping us sick.
Amen to that. And I hope that this will put the ball rolling in a positive direction in terms of food dyes. This is one of those things that, 15, 20 years ago, as I was growing up, I would have said efforts to ban things, ban ingredients from our food and food products. Oh, that's just nanny state government. But as time has gone on and I've been illuminated to some of the just absolutely horrible things that are in our foods, it becomes very apparent to me anyway that actually is a good role for government to make sure that companies don't just get to poison you. According to multiple reports from multiple outlets, the Trump administration has been mulling a way to get more Americans married and having kids, including a $5,000 baby bonus for every new mom after delivery. White House officials have recently been brainstorming plans to tackle the declining birth and marriage rates and push more Americans towards the traditional family values of Trump and his allies. One plan would give $5,000 incentives to new moms, while another would see that 30% of all Fulbright scholarships be given to applicants who are married or have children. Another option being considered would have the government fund programs to educate women on their menstrual cycle so they can know when they are ovulating and able to conceive. Birth rates in the U.S. have, of course, long been slipping, hitting a new low in 2023 with just under 3.6 million babies born that year. Going back to the last Monday's air analysis in the white pill of all white pills when it comes to birth rates in this country and how the overall birth rate, even state by state, doesn't tell the whole story. Overall, in the long term, I'm optimistic because it seems like the people who actually love this country the most and have the most at stake in making sure they pass down a livable country to their children are the ones who are actually at replacement or above replacement rate. I think that this plan, $5,000 to new moms, I'm sure it comes from a good place, good intentions. But you'll notice that the plan itself to give $5,000, it's not to new moms and dads, it's just to new moms. So what are you incentivizing? What are some unforeseen consequences or unintended consequences, good intentions though you may have? What are some unintended consequences of this? Well, you might be incentivizing single motherhood and fatherless kids. That obviously is an even bigger problem than not having enough money to raise those kids to begin with. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth continues to go on the warpath against the disgruntled employees, he says, who are leaking slanderous hit pieces about him in the media.
When you dismiss people who you believe are leaking classified information, and again, the investigation is ongoing and that will take time, and when the evidence produced, it will go to DOJ, why would it surprise anybody, Brian, if those very same people keep leaking to the very same reporters whatever information they think they can have to try to sabotage the agenda of the president or the secretary? So once a leaker, always a leaker, often a leaker. And so we looked for leakers because we take it very seriously. And we will do the investigation. Right. And if those people are exonerated, fantastic. We don't think, based on what we understand, that it's going to be a good day for a number of those individuals because of what was found in the investigation. So if they want to keep leaking and pushing and peddling things that try to sabotage the president's agenda, that's unfortunate. But that's how leaking works in this town. We're focused on recruiting, on rooting out DEI, on securing our southwest border, on the president's agenda, and it's going very well at the Pentagon, and I'm proud of it.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says, once a leaker, always a leaker, often a leaker. That's also me every morning when my stomach is full of water and coffee. Should I say that out loud? Probably not. Again, I'm sure there's some wrangling in terms of ideological bent going on in right-wing America, at least with who is being staffed at Pete Hegseth's Pentagon, who he's got around him. I'm sure there's some wrangling going around there on certain issues. But overall, I think it's still true what I said yesterday, that Pete Hegseth is over the target on a lot of issues, not just foreign policy, but in terms of actually remaking the military. And that's why the mainstream media is more than happy. And you'll see there are very few senators. I'm not sure if there are any senators that I have seen who have actually come to Hegseth's defense. They are more than happy to let him out there and flail kind of by himself. For now, though, President Trump has his back. One more thing before we hit our break. Here is Rosie O'Donnell on CNN being asked why she left the country when President Trump got elected.
I have no regrets. Not a day has gone by that I thought it was the wrong decision. I was welcomed with open arms. I knew after reading Project 2025 that if Trump got in, it was time for me and my non-binary child to leave the country. And although I was not one of the celebrities who announced that that's what I would do, I made the decision within my family and my therapist. And should he win, and then when he did, we made the plan into action, and we were gone before he was inaugurated.
That might be the biggest compliment so far of the Trump administration, that a groomer like Rosie O'Donnell, because you're a groomer if you decide your young child who can't even decide what color they like best yet, when you decide for them that they are non-binary, it's probably a pretty good compliment that you don't feel comfortable in a country like this. When we come back, California has a new gubernatorial candidate, including a look back at the outgoing Gavin Newsom. Another Soros-backed district attorney, this time in Minnesota, is letting a Tesla terrorist go off scot-free, and an apology from Christianity Today. That's coming up next.
Let me tell you, leading the greatest state in the greatest nation on earth is not some consolation prize to be handed out to a failed and rejected machine politician from Washington who can barely string a coherent sentence together and who thinks she should get this job because of her identity, not her ability. So bring it, Kamala. If you decide to run for governor, we will beat you again.
That is former Fox News host Steve Hilton, who officially made it official yesterday that he is running for governor of California. And he made no bones about who he thinks he'll be running against on the Democrat side. He thinks, well, at least you heard it there, he thinks it could be Kamala Harris. Let's do a retrospective now. Just where we are at the California Republic, or the People's Republic of California, as some say. This is 2008. Here's Governor Gavin Newsom talking about that elusive high-speed rail project.
You can get down to L.A. in 2.5 hours, $55. In California,
2009.
We're still debating a high-speed rail. What a joke.
Well, finally,
2010.
California is going to get it right with this new high-speed rail.
I personally have been
2011.
a high-speed rail project since my time as mayor of the city and county of San Francisco.
The project,
2018.
$33 billion project. The project's years and years behind. The project's wildly over budget. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea.
You can get phase
2018.
In essence, is from Bakersfield to Silicon Valley. We do have the capacity
2019.
to complete a high-speed rail link between Merced and Bakersfield. Now, I know some critics are going to say, well, that's a train to nowhere. We have a real
2021
partner with our high-speed rail system, an incredible opportunity to finish the work at high-speed rail.
2022.
$4.2 billion is being requested of the legislature to finish the job.
Someone who's
2023.
all in on the high-speed rail, the high-speed rail.
2024.
A rail project, but an economic development project.
2025.
$billion. It's about damn time we have a high-speed rail system.
There you just heard that montage. That is from Planet of Memes on X. And Senator Brian Jones originally posted that. I think that's a state senator. Going all the way back to 2018, nearly 20 years of Gavin Newsom talking and making wild promises about the high-speed rail. I looked this up yesterday. So far, the initial operating route or corridor is expected to be up and running by 2030, with the full route expected by 2050. It's just billions of dollars into a money pit. Best of luck to former Fox News host Steve Hilton, running for California governor. A progressive district attorney has declined to charge the state employee in Tim Walz-led Minnesota, who was allegedly caught causing $20,000 in damage by vandalizing a half-dozen Teslas, a decision the local police chief ripped as the latest betrayal of victims. The suspected vandal, 33-year-old Minnesota government employee Dylan Bryan Adams, was allegedly spotted keying the vehicles and stripping their paint off while walking his dog around Minneapolis. Despite what police believe to be evidence of Adams committing felonies, Hennepin County District Attorney Mary Moriarty, who is a Soros-backed district attorney, will seek diversion rather than criminal charges. The attorney's office said in a statement, quote, "This is an approach taken in many property crime cases and helps to ensure the individuals keep their job and can pay restitution, as well as reducing the likelihood of repeat offenses." Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said at the time of the incident that the damage in each case was the equivalent of a felony. The chief said in a scathing statement on Monday that Moriarty's decision not to bring charges is frustrating for his officers and the public. Yeah, no, you think? Should be a felon. And now this Soros-backed district attorney is deciding, well, he's not going to face any jail time at all. Daniel Silliman is the Christianity Today author who wrote that piece over the Easter holiday weekend discussing how Jesus wasn't actually nailed to a cross. Some evangelical Bible scholar says he was actually roped to the cross. Well, Daniel Silliman is out with an apology. He writes at Christianity Today yesterday, "Like so many Christians, I spent a lot of time before Easter thinking about the crucifixion, how it must have felt for Jesus to die that way, how God chose this particular device of Roman terror to accomplish our salvation, and how it worked practically to kill someone on the cross. An article in the Biblical Archaeology Review piqued my reporting curiosity. A Bible professor suggested it was possible that crucifixions at the time of Christ's death used ropes rather than nails. That's obviously an idiosyncratic view. That means a wrong view, and almost certainly wrong. It seemed to me, but I thought it was interesting," Daniel says. "My curiosity took me to the descriptions of Christ's death and the details in those accounts. I didn't think about John 20:25 and the implication of the idea that Thomas was mistaken to think that the resurrected Jesus would have nail marks in his hands. Thomas clearly would not have said that if Romans at that time used ropes. My article implicitly called into question the inerrancy of Scripture. In my eagerness to explore the historical context of Christ's death, I missed that, and I'm sorry." That is Daniel Silliman at the Christianity Today. His apology for what he says, "I was just intellectually curious, and my curiosity led me to apostasy." It's just ridiculous. The Supreme Court heard arguments on Tuesday from religious parents who say young children can't be expected to separate a teacher's moral messages from their family's beliefs, raising the question of whether exposure to rainbow jihad-themed storybooks in elementary classrooms constitutes coercion. Eric Baxter, the attorney representing Maryland parents in Mahmoud v. Taylor, told the justices that Montgomery County Public Schools violated the First Amendment by denying opt-out requests for books that contradict their religious beliefs. Well, those oral arguments were heard yesterday. Here is a debate between Justice Brett Kavanaugh and Alan Schoenfield, who is representing Montgomery County Public Schools. Listen to this.
Opt-outs for all sorts of things. The county has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The other Maryland counties have opt-outs for all sorts of things. And yet for this one thing, they changed in mid-year and say no more opt-outs. I'm just not understanding feasibility.
So, again, I think what's in the record is that with respect to these books as they were deployed in the classroom, there was high absenteeism in some schools. For example, dozens of students being opted out in, I think Mr. Baxter said the average size of an elementary school in Montgomery County is 700 students, so each grade is 125. If you have dozens of students walking out, making arrangements for those students to have adequate space and supervision and alternative instruction, I think is infeasible.
But they do it for all sorts of other opt-outs.
They don't do it for all sorts of other opt-outs. There's a limited universe of things that students can opt out from. The Family Life and Healthy Sexuality curriculum stands alone. It is mandated by the state. It is something where you are able to predict precisely when the curriculum is going to be deployed. There's
It's the most similar substantively to what we have here, and there's an opt-out allowed there. I guess I'm not understanding why Montgomery County School Board stands alone. I think in the country. You can tell me if there's another school board that's done something like this.
I apologize.
Both the kind of books that are being used and prohibiting opt-outs. And I guess I'm just not understanding. The whole goal, I think, of some of our religion precedents is to look for the win-win, to look for the situation where you can respect the religious beliefs and accommodate the religious beliefs while the state or city or whatever it may be can pursue its goals. And here, they're not asking you to change what's taught in the classroom. They're not asking you to change that at all. A lot of the rhetoric suggests that they might have, that they were trying to do that, but that's not what they're trying to do. They're only seeking to be able to walk out so that they don't have to, the parents don't have their children exposed to these things that are contrary to their own beliefs.
That is Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And if even somebody like he is saying this is so beyond the pale, you have opt-outs for everything. Why are Montgomery County schools basically penalizing parents for opting their children out of just debased material, these awful, just degenerate works, these publications? If you can opt out of so many other things, why can't you opt out of this? And you heard that attorney say, well, it's just unfeasible. We can't find another classroom for these kids to go into. This is just beyond the pale. This is an undue burden. And Justice Kavanaugh says, just get out of here with that. This is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous argument. You know what's also ridiculous? 25 years ago, heck, even maybe 10 years ago, before Obergefell, and we are approaching the 10-year anniversary of Obergefell, the cry of the Rainbow Jihad movement was, get out of our lives. We just want to do what we want to do in private. Okay, this doesn't affect you. What we do in our own private bedrooms doesn't have any impact on your life. Just 10 short years later, you have to let the children listen to pornography, okay? Let your kindergartners, let your second, fourth graders. You got to let them listen to really sexually explicit material in the classroom, okay? You have to. Otherwise, it's too big of a deal for us to find another classroom for them to occupy themselves in. 10 years. That's all it takes. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. I just want to preview tomorrow's poll of the week. And I don't usually do this. I try not to stretch content out too far. But I asked you, what do you consider a win in the tariff war? And I gave you three main options. And I concocted this poll before Trump made those comments that you heard earlier from the Oval Office. Some of his critics are saying this is a total capitulation, walking back. I'm not sure. I mean, you could construe it that way for sure. But I think in the context of, hey, we want to make a deal with China, the tariffs will come down when they come to the table. It makes more sense than just seeing those or hearing those comments out of context. It would make it seem like he's just bowing the knee and capitulating. Nevertheless, I gave you three options. Number one, marginally better trade deals, but with a clear path of decoupling from China. 2, truly free trade with every trading partner, China included. Or 3, you just think that there's no win. I voted for A. I think this will be a win. And I'm saying this, marginally better trade deals with everyone and a clear path of decoupling from China. I think that's actually probably the best thing that we can accomplish at this juncture. Now, I might not have said that 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it's become abundantly obvious that the appetite for any form of instability, getting uncomfortable, the treasuries are acting up again, the dollar is tanking, the markets are uncertain, look at the price of gold. The appetite for any sort of uncertainty when it comes to our financial system. I'm not talking about from the White House. I'm talking about from every house, seemingly, especially Wall Street. And especially the elites who have been making money off of globalization hand over fist for decades now. They have very little appetite for any form of, hey, cinch the belt buckle up just a little bit here. So I really do believe the best case scenario is a clear path of decoupling from China and marginally better trade deals. Do I think we will see some tariffs stick around, especially on China for sure? Yes, I do think that will be the case. But I think in this particular instance, in this particular tariff war, that's probably going to be the best case scenario. What do you think? Let me know. That's the poll of the week. What do you consider a win in the tariff war? You can go off the reservation as well. Any of those options or your own, let me know at Real AM Update. Look for the pinned post at Real AM Update on X. Hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.